Hello, this is G. Michael Vasey talking, and welcome to another episode of My Haunted Life 2 podcast series. And if you haven't been to the website recently, why not? Why not indeed? There's been some really creepy stories submitted, and today I'm going to read you some of them. Somebody called Sean submitted some comments about the hotel he was staying in real time. He doesn't tell us where he's staying, but he says, 20th of September, and I'm staying in room 130. I was woken up during the night with the TV turning on by itself with the volume full on. I switched it off, and again, later on it did the same thing. To be honest, I'm a little freaked. 21st September, and the TV came on once and I could feel something not right in the room. I don't normally believe this stuff, but something is strange and I've barely slept. I've got 2 more nights here, but I think I'm going to have to change rooms. I know that feeling quite well. I've stayed in 1 or 2 haunted locations myself, and in fact, I wrote a book about haunted hotels called Motel Hell. It's full of stories of haunted, creepy hotels and motels, and these are all real stories taken from actual guest reviews. Then there was the story submitted by Michael Blackburn. He says that when he was aged around 13 or 14, he was quite cruel to some defenceless creatures with a then childhood friend of his. The cruelty caught the attention of Lucifer, the devil himself. He says, I was in bed awake when I heard 3 taps mocking the Holy Trinity at my upstairs bedroom window, and there was Lucifer himself staring through the window at me with a curious interest. As Lucifer was not human-looking at all, with a very large oval-shaped eyes and small, sharp, bony features, and with no hair on his misshapen head, I too was looking at him with great curiosity. I could only see him from his upper body, and could not see if he had wings or not, and I wondered if he had flown or levitated, or had scaled my parents' house wall. After a few short minutes, Lucifer got tired of the staring situation, and with a hand gesture at me, I was put to sleep in an instant. Following this encounter event, I was sent the most frightening nightmare in my life, in the form of conjoined twins of evil with a long dagger. In the nightmare, I was paralysed in bed on my back, as the corpse-like twins burst open my bedroom door, and walking in unison, proceeded to come to my bed, where they plunged the dagger deep inside my chest, in what I believe was some kind of ritual marking for my soul. After this ordeal, the very next day, I stopped all my cruel actions on the creatures, which I believe has stained my soul forever, and I began to do more good things each day. Some years later, aged 26 and married, I had developed asthma due to smoking, and actually died one night as my heart stopped beating and my spirit left my body. I was soon travelling up a multicoloured tunnel at fast speed to the other side. It seemed my good living and change of my ways had sent me in the right direction, but I was not ready to go at such a young age and with my wife left behind me. I protested with all my might that I was not yet ready, and someone on the other side heard me. The tunnel suction was soon put in reverse, and I was sucked back into my body at fast speed to live again, with an oxygen-starved headache which felt like my head would explode. But at least I was back and alive, which was all that mattered to me. And here's another story submitted by Night Owl. I used to live in a big Victorian-era home that was chopped into 4 apartments. There was a tenant living in the apartment right next to mine. She was a mother, a single mother with 3 kids, and a drug addict. After they moved in, I started waking up to the Hatman shadow. he would be staring at me and usually went back to her place. I didn't feel it was evil, but it had a very strong presence. At first I thought I was having dreams, but my dog, she slept on the bed next to me, was also very aware of him. She didn't act scared or aggressive, but she was very alert, watching him. This woman was very paranoid and sometimes would take off weeks at a time, and her mother would have to come over to help with the kids. Whenever she was away, the Hat Man did not appear. On the day she moved out, her mother said, "Everyone thinks it's the drugs, but that isn't it." We were interrupted by another neighbour and I never got to finish the conversation. I tried to find her because I wanted to know more, but I didn't have any luck. However, the Hat Man never came back. And here's another one submitted by P. Rajput. I've had so many things of paranormal nature happen to me over the years, starting when I was a very little girl, up until last year when I turned 60 years old. I don't know if I'm sensitive to these things, whatever they are, or I've just lived in places where the activity was already there and I'm tuned into it. The weirdest thing I've ever seen was in broad daylight around 2 p.m. My husband and I were watching TV, and my mother-in-law, who lived with us, came out of her bedroom and went out of the front door to sit on the porch in the sun. She'd left the door open to the bedroom straight across from where I was sitting on the couch in the living room. I looked down at my little Yorkie, Benny, who was sitting on my lap, because he suddenly jerked his head up. When I looked up, across the room to where he was looking and shaking, I saw something that, to this day, I have never seen before on any paranormal program, nor heard any stories about. The thing was about 5 feet tall. It was solid, black and shiny. You could see that it almost had a head, although it really wasn't shaped like a head, but from the shoulders down there were no arms or legs. It was a solid mass of shiny, black, inky-looking thing that looked like it was just standing there, although you could see no legs. Where the eyes should have been, there were none, but there seemed to be some kind of intelligence to it, because I could feel the hatred emanating from this thing towards me. The strange thing is, it didn't scare me. I looked at it for at least a minute, and my husband, who was sitting to the side of me in the recliner, had his nose in his computer, and when I said his name, "Look at the doorway," he didn't look up. And so when I looked at him and said his name again louder and looked back, it was gone. That's when I started to be afraid, because I couldn't get that thing out of my mind. I thought about it day and night. After that happened, all sorts of weird, strange things happened in my house, not only to me but to other people. It's been 4 years since I saw the black, shiny thing in my house, and I can see it today in my mind as clear as the day that I saw it. I don't know what it was. I don't know what it wanted. But after my husband and I divorced and I stayed in the bedroom, I had a lot of things happen to me to the point of where I stopped sleeping in that room forever. I have a lot of other stories: doppelgangers, black shadows, noises, bad luck, and I mean really, really bad luck, all happening within days. My son and his wife and stepdaughter have seen a lot of things too, and they finally moved out of this house because the activity got so bad. And here's a pretty long submission by Megan. Hi there, my name is Megan and I live in rural Nova Scotia, Canada. I was recently listening to you on Jim Harold's Paranormal podcast about peripheral people, which had synchronistic timing with my recent experience. That episode was extra spooky for me because I happened to be travelling on a dark night in a rural area at 3 a.m. in Shag Harbour, known for a famous UFO crash. I was on my way to meet a woman who travelled from across the province with both of our newly adopted puppies. Not only was I completely gobsmacked that your explanation of peripheral people so perfectly described a recent experience I had, but I also kept getting sent down spooky dead-end streets in the middle of nowhere by my Maps app. The event happened sometime this past summer. I was living alone at the time with my kids. I live in a small village on a main rural route highway. It was around 11 p.m. and my kids were finally in bed after a very trying evening, and I was exhausted and had just gratefully crawled into my bed. Unfortunately, I was having a tough time falling asleep because for no apparent reason I was uneasy, nervous and spooked that night. It was oddly quiet. No wind, no trees rustling, nor traffic. Then I heard what sounded like the ambling footsteps and chit-chat of a couple of young girls walking down the street. By the sounds of it, they seemed to linger in front of my house for an oddly long time. I thought it strange that kids should be out on a school night after 11 p.m, and it bothered me that they were hanging out in front of my house. I got up to look out of my hallway window. I wanted to see if I could recognise the girls so I could let their parents know they were out and about. As soon as I looked out of the window, the noises stopped completely and there were no girls to be seen. What did I see? What I did see across the road were two garbage bags, one white and one black. I stood there for some time, just pondering why those should be there. I didn't remember putting garbage there. And my neighbours didn't put the garbage there either. As I'm staring and pondering the garbage bags, they begin to transform before my eyes. But when I say transform, they didn't morph. I couldn't see the shape actually changing bit by bit. It was more like a very fluid transformation. One moment they were garbage bags, and the next they were crouching kids with hoodies on, one black, one white, crouching down low and seemingly looking at the ground. I stood watching in disbelief as they very slowly, and again almost fluidly, rose to their feet, standing shoulder to shoulder, staring straight ahead across the road at my house. At this point, I was in denial about what I'd seen because I was not wondering why I'd just seen garbage bags transform into kids. I was thinking, why aren't they looking around? Why are they just staring straight ahead like that? And I wondered if they had some friends maybe getting up to no good on my property. So I went to peek out of another window overlooking the backyard and saw nothing. Then I heard the noises again, chit-chat of girls and ambling footsteps continuing on down the road. I was returning to look again at the two hooded girls, but by the time I made it back to the window, they were nowhere to be seen. I crawled back into bed and oddly enough, I was completely prepared to forget it and go to sleep. How strange is that? I wasn't even thinking about the strangeness of what I'd just seen. And honestly, it didn't even occur to me to ponder it or mention it to anyone until months later. Anyhow, almost as soon as I get under the covers, I hear this insanely loud electronic dance music coming from the neighbour's house. I peer out of the bedroom window and notice there are crazy strobe lights and disco lights just blaring from the house with the music. Now, these neighbours don't make a peep. If I hadn't seen them let their dog out from time to time, I wouldn't even know that anyone lived there. They certainly didn't party. The lights and music went on for exactly one song and stopped. Just like that. Done. That was the end of my experience. Were they black-eyed kids? I don't know. I did not see the eyes of the kids because they had hoods on and I was looking down from my upstairs window. They didn't look up at me or anywhere but straight ahead at my house. The house with the musics and lights was across the street and in the same direction they were walking. So my guess is that whatever these entities were, they were pondering coming into my house and decided against it, and decided on my neighbour's house instead. Of course, I can't ask my neighbours about this, but I will say that I wondered about the possible energetic attractiveness of their home versus mine. I don't want to judge, but the yard is always full of junk, and there seems to be a general unpleasantness about the place and the folks who live there. Upon recalling this story, I remembered once, about a year ago, while walking my dog at night, I noticed a seemingly empty house in the village with really strange strobe lights going on inside. It spooked me so much that I filmed it as I walked by, and I still have that video on my phone. I wonder if these peripheral people or black-eyed kids, if that's what they are, just kind of haunt the neighbourhood. Whatever they are, I don't think they're good, and I hope I don't ever see them again. P.S. Not long after that experience, my neighbour's dog came into my yard at about the same time of night as that experience and brutalised and killed my cat. So you can see how my experience contains so many elements that you described in that podcast about peripheral people. The timing is curious, and I was simultaneously spooked and surprised while listening, and to be honest, quite relieved, because I can now place this experience in a category. Well, I've actually subsequently written a scary book about peripheral people, although it's called Liminal People, and it's available on all Amazon sites. Please do stop by the website myhauntedlife2.com and check out the stories. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of super creepy true stories. Not only that, but if you have had an experience, and let's face it, everyone has a story, why don't you share it with me? And you might find me reading your story on the next episode of the My Haunted Life 2 podcast series.